I got it.
Okay, folks, today I am here with author Lyn McGinnis. Lyn has penned a book, Heshevira's Challenge, a new Awake series, book number one, which means there's more to come. I was lucky enough to get a gift while she was here in the Big Apple of this copy of this a physical copy of the book, and not being one for science fiction. Um, I was touched by it and I loved it and I enjoyed it and I can't wait. I think it could be right up there with the Star Wars or like, you said, Lynn, you said your inspiration, some of it is taken from Lord of the Rings, you know, from being a part of the LGBTQ community. Um, for everyone out there who might be curious, what is Heshevira's challenge about?
The short answer is this is the first of a series of novels, as you said. I would characterize it more as fantasy, but I mean, there's one form of technology, excuse me, which I would say is biotechnology, or sort of a magical version of biotechnology. Heshevira's Challenge is about beginnings. It's about a ancient society that is sort of running out of steam, has had a lot of things that have gone wrong. And over a long period of time, a group of generations have worked on finding a way of dealing with what they see as the number one reason that everything breaks, everything falls apart, and they term it self-absorption. And so they have worked through sort of a earth magic type of set of disciplines to find a way of addressing that. And so they've created sort of an overlay over the existing collective life of the planet, which is termed raw life, which is just like ours, where everything eats everything, and everybody overproduces, knowing that most of the babies never survive. And survival is a very ugly and destructive and nasty business. And one of the ways that translates into self-aware societies is that there's rampant selfishness and short-sightedness, and it always short circuits every attempt to try to create a better world. So these people who are called masters have worked on this sort of biotechnology. One of the things they do is they sort of create a set of archetypes. There's 12 of them that sort of are handles that people can access to help monitor the system. And they all have names, and they're all magical, luminous creatures. And one of them is called Heshevira, and she is sort of the one that takes care of the original raw life. And Heshevira's challenge is that as the system quickens and begins to finally waken up, she is disturbed by this and actually tries to fight against it. So that's the challenge. And the characters there's a diverse group of characters, 3 sets of characters. The one set is very much part of this. They're masters, and there's the one character, she is becoming an advocate, and she's very much involved in this. And the other 2 are very different. The 2 of them are sort of like humanoid. I mean, I didn't reinvent the wheel as far as this goes. Most of the characters are bipedal, 2 arms, 2 legs. But the other one is this sort of sad and fascinating boy who's fairly deranged, but is also brilliant, who sort of represents the old system and is fighting against the new order. And the other is the enemy of them both, which is a bipedal species that is intent on wiping all of them out. So it's a story of following 3 of them, and they're all youngish characters as they move through these momentous series of occasions, which leads to the quickening of what this new system, and it's called Tatchland, which is going to change everything. And that's what the rest of the series is about. This is about the beginning of that process.
It sounds like there's a lot of parallels. There's a lot of, to life. Life is, as you said it's a very tough business. It's a very you use more descriptive adjectives than I just did. But life is a very
I write much better than I speak, like most of us.
right. No, well, you speak very well, and your the book is incredible. Um, what what um what would you say is your process? This so I did say science fiction, and thank you for correcting me. It is fantasy. Um,
These labels are, have their uses. And so
right,
I
right.
think science fiction is having more mechanical or digital, technologies. This is a society, or will be a society, where essentially all of that genius gets channeled into, essentially, from their point of view, making life better and doing it at a sort of a biological level, where they use sort of altered states by various means to enter into life, even though they don't go anywhere per se. They see it completely differently, and they're able to have an effect on it. So it's, in a way, it's technological in a sense. The magic is the magic they create. There's no magic existing otherwise. They make it. These characters create the magic of this world. And so, there's all sorts of labels you can put on it. I just think people tend to think science fiction is, ray guns and spaceships. And this
Yeah,
is on one world, and it's very much about the biology of that world, and it's about the cultures that grow out of it through profound efforts by generations whose motivation is to make their world better.
now, how do you keep like consistency and things of that nature? Like, like for me, writing, it's like, you know, I when I write, as you know, I'm a writer as well, and I write in a very linear process. Then I go back and I edit, and you're creating new worlds. You're creating things that don't exist. You're creating even words that don't exist. How do you keep it all together? How do you keep it all organized? Because even when I'm talking about telling a story about it, like people who really exist, they already have a name, they already have a sort of, they already have a way that I can describe them. Their actions are describable, their abilities are, of this earth, they're describable. You're talking about life forms that don't exist, that are purely, like you said, fantasy. How do you keep all of that organized in your head and like tell the story without you know slipping out of the fantasy? Like, how do you do that?
Well, I think the only way for something like this is that, in a sense, for me, it's not a fantasy. For sense, it's been something that's been living inside my head for an excess of 40 to 50 years. The artwork you see behind you actually is some of the earliest iterations of this, and that goes back to the 70s and earlier. And that was sort of before I had any sort of narrative. But I must tell you that, like, other influences would include Frank Herbert's Dune series and Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. When I read those when I was a kid, I had this very interesting experience where I sort of felt like I was reading about these very big, epic stories, which involved a very large canvas and many characters and some very big ideas. And it's hard to describe, but I sort of felt an answering echo inside myself, like there was something there. Like there was, like there was a place inside me that was similar to this. So this is when I was a teenager and I didn't have a clue. But I was doing other things as well. I mean, I've always obviously been a creative person, but for the longest time, it took a long time to develop the focus. And for me, the only way to get that kind of focus, that kind of clarity, was time. Was working on this. I've been working on this pretty consistently all this time. Now, there's been times where I've stepped away from it, and there's been times where I've done more or less, but it's always been part of me. And so there's a cumulative aspect. One of the interesting things I remembered reading once, and memory being what it is and what I know, I'm this may well be a recreation and not necessarily what I originally read. But Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of The Lord of the Rings, was asked by somebody once, golly, professor, where do you get your ideas? And he pointed out the back, what I recall he said is he pointed out his back garden. He had he had a midden heap, which in North America you'd call a compost heap, a place where you pile up organic material, layer upon layer, you use it in the garden. And he said that is an analogy, or that's what I'm remembering now, for collective cumulative life experience. How you develop over time this layer upon layer of living activity and memory of that. And out of that, things blossom, things grow, which has certainly been my experience. The vast majority of these creations, these creatures, these places, whatever, have literally popped into my head. I'll be writing and it will just be there. I'll be taking a shower and pop, there it will be. And it's like it's something coming out. And I found that a very useful analogy. It felt like, I mean, I've had some amazing experiences. I've climbed the Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico. I've watched the New Year's ceremony in the Temple of the Emerald Buddha in Bangkok. I've had experiences which are conducive to having a bigger vision and having an alternate vision. But it's just life in general that with a crazy interesting brain there already has created this fertile landscape that just produces stuff. So whenever I start writing, whenever I start creating, things just happen. So to answer your question, you keep doing this long enough, the landscape starts forming and starts having a topography and starts having a landscape. Another analogy, if I may, is that one of my favorite living British fantasy authors is Philip Pullman, who some people may know, who did his Dark Materials, which is now being dramatized. And he did a talk once where he talked about, Robert Frost's poem, The Road Less Traveled, where he's walking through a wood and he finds a path that's different and he goes on it. Philip Pullman talked about that in a different way. He talked about it from the point of view of creating stories. The path wouldn't exist but for the forest. The forest, for me, I planted that forest. That forest, everything that's in that forest at one point or another popped. It grew, it sprouted out of the ground and it grew. And of course, I write these things down. I have to do, but with that, it becomes integrated and it becomes something that's there without me having to look it up. I know it's there, and I know how it relates to this tree and that tree, how they relate to each other. And so it becomes a memory. It becomes a lived experience where I've been there regularly. So it's familiar territory, as I say, over decades for parts of it. And so I keep track because in a way it's not a fantasy. It's a mental reality for me. It is a place that exists for me. When I start to write, I never know how the chapter is going to end. I've done all I hear there's two types of writers. There's the people who plot everything out, and there's people who are sort of seat of their pants writing. They just start and they just write. I do both. I do the plotting out about the whole world, but then when I start a chapter, 5 minutes into writing it, character's up and doing something and going somewhere and saying something I wasn't expecting, and then something else happens, and I'm like a stenographer taking all this dialogue down and all this stuff down. And by the end of the chapter, I'm often surprised. Oh, that's interesting. I may have an end goal. Eventually we're all going to go way down here. It's like the Hobbit movie where they, at one point in the first movie, they see the mountain way far away in the distance, but you can't tell what they're going to encounter in between, and that's the rest of the story. So I may know I know there's someplace that I want us to go, but every day, as far as the story goes, is a surprise. I do go back, of course, and I do all the editing and the revising, and I all of that for sure. And that's, but like when I'm actually doing the writing and it's happening, it's like my whole brain lights up. It's
I
like,
feel the same way, in a way, like, you sit down and you write with intention. You write with the intention of like, okay, and this is, I write nonfiction, and you're like, I want to tell this story, but like with one line or one word of dialogue from a person that you're talking about, that reminds you, or it triggers something that somebody else said, and then you go all, and instead of it being this like linear road, you end up going all the way through to get to that end point. And you do, like you said, you do reach the end point. However, getting there, it's like the alphabet. You go from A, you intend to go to B, but how you get to Z is not necessarily, structured. It's not necessarily, written already, so.
absolutely. And if I might add, the other thing that is very clear, and this is part of the brain lighting up thing, is once I start writing, my characters are alive and they are living at that moment in their context, in their world, and they're living their lives. And I'm experiencing that and writing it as they're living it. So as I say, in that sense, I'm very much the seat of the pants writer. And at that moment, the characters and the situations unfold as if as they are experienced by the characters as real events, and them as real people. And so that it's very much a case of what's happening is that I'm writing and my brain's creating it. It's making it happen. And it's
Do you
like,
find that the characters are taking over? Did the characters inside are just like, they're like maybe they're like a brain, like you described it as the brain lighting up, like the each like ignition is sort of like a character taking on a life of its own.
absolutely, they're alive. When I'm writing, they're alive, and they are living, and they are experiencing and feeling and dealing with whatever their challenges are. As to me, it feels like as we would. They're in their situation, which is very different in a lot of ways to us. But as I say, I didn't reinvent the wheel. These are essentially, while these characters and while this culture is very different to what we have, and a lot of the rules are different, and these will be a different universe as far as how the rules work. Essentially, the characters are still recognizable. Even the Savuka, who are the four-legged ones, they're still quite understandable as creatures, as how they think and how they interact with each other. So it's still very much it yeah, it's now I've lost my train of thought. But I hope I'm clear as what I was saying.
No, you are. I mean, it's definitely that they have their relatable characters.
I
They,
think so.
even the ones that have four legs are sort of like, I mean, I think what people tend to do is they tend to think of, if you introduce a character with four legs, they go to the first thing. Like I jump, I know like some spiders have six legs, or some spiders have, whatever, and I jump to that, and that's like my comparison. And I just make it bigger or smaller in my head, and in the book, obviously, you're really descriptive, and you're really telling a story about these very specific characters, and they do, I think it's a good thing. Like when people say the book was better than the movie, I think it's because they get to make up in their mind what the
I
landscape
agree with
look.
that.
Even though you're describing it, they still get to add like a shade of color, or the shade of you know, the shape, or the lightness, the darkness, the lack of, they get to add these things. They get to, sort of have their own brains light up.
Well, that is the thing with a book. There are pros and cons to everything. So a film adaptation, if it's very well done, is a wonderful thing. So I will never say that's a bad thing. It's same with other adaptations. But the reality is that if you are reading words on the page, you are yourself creating the experience. You are creating an experience that you then go into. and you are the author of that. I mean,
Because you're taking all of your own life stuff. You're taking it all with you into
yep.
the page.
So that's right. So I mean, now most people who have read this have told me they think the Savuka are sort of talkative bears, which is as good an analogy as anything I can think of. I think they're fairly bear-like in a number of ways, but yeah, no, as I say, I wanted them to be relatable. Even though, and I mean, it's always a challenge. It has always been a challenge. And I think in the second novel, which I'm being premature here, but it's coming, I've tried and I've got a little bit better in trying to keep the expository material, the descriptive material in balance with characters doing things and saying things. I know there's a lot to explain and it's a balancing act. And I hope that I have done a pretty good job in balancing those two so that you're not mired down. Like I'm not interested. I want people, whenever there is something that's going to, that needs to be done or said, I want the characters to do or say it. I don't want to spend 5-10 pages inside a character's head. I don't like that kind of writing. I find that very tedious. So I do.
Right. Well, people also get bogged down in exposition, if like you're just
hard. Especially when it's another place. When it's this place, you got to describe everything. And so I try to, but I try to do it in stages, and I try to, as much as possible, have any sort of description done in dialogue, as opposed to going on and on and on about whatever.
Well, there's so many ways, like from the point of view of the other characters, or from the point of view of the reader, or from the point of view of the character themselves, like to describe. It's just sort of like the story is the main focus, and it's really quite remarkable. LGBTQ. That's the another thing that you brought up as sort of I don't want to say muse, but how did you put it on the book? You said being a member of the LGBT community, bringing subtle elements to this aspect into the book. What subtle aspect? What elements did you find helped you write this book?
Well, it is just very much part of my cumulative experience. It's very much part of my landscape, that constructed landscape of life experience. It's there, and so it's just a natural part of the stories. I would say that this will get explored more in subsequent novels, but there are hints even in this first one, just of I would say that pretty well the universal orientation, even though it's not really touched on much in this first novel, but it will be subsequently, is bisexual. There's a lot of gender. In fact, there's two different groups that will be prominent in subsequent ones. Ones are called betweens, which are sort of like I am. Somebody who is born in the gender binary, but who expresses a larger spectrum than the cultural constructs that used to be presumed with that. Actually, what we would call intersex are given a different name in my series. They're called completes, and they're actually venerated as complete and whole, perfect beings. And so
that's really interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a number of and also the social organization, which is hinted at near the end of this first novel, the idea of a circle of 8, which is 6 men and 2 women. It's a polyamorous arrangement, and that's going to be the norm. The polyamorous arrangement, circles of 8 within a cluster, which is an arrangement of a certain number of circles of 8. That's going to be the circle of 8 is going to be the basic social unit of the subsequent societies. So in a lot of ways, it's going to be as queer as hell as far as the social landscape that all of the characters inhabit. it's not going to be dwelt on. I'm not one who is interested in either explicit going on about explicit sexuality or explicit violence. You will not see much of that. I'm much more interested in the ideas surrounding that. And there are occasions. There's one scene in a much later book. I got all of the books in my head at this point. So where there's like a big battle that does take place. You see it before and you see after. You don't see the event, and you get the full. I think it's still quite interesting, but and that's I like the ideas around these and the implications and social dynamics. It's I'm not going to get into sweaty stuff.
Right.
I
No,
mean,
I mean, just
but I'm just not. I'm not interested in writing about it, and I think I can do much more without doing that as much as the vast majority of press of stuff that's coming out now that it capitalizes on it. I mean, it's a whole huge genre now, and it's
I think it's more amazing. I think it's like there's a place for the sweaty, dirty stuff and everything like that, but like describing and giving a voice to just people who have non-traditional by today's standards or by yesterday's standards arrangement in their lives, or like they express different gender norms, like yourself, like myself, like many other people. I think giving characters a voice without necessarily having to hit it on the nose and without having to go into the nitty gritty dirty, like you don't have to describe below the waist, you don't have to describe what's underneath, you just sort of give a voice to people who are who they are,
and that's where we live most of our lives anyway. No matter how active we can be, it's still just a small part of life. And but what's much a far larger part is how that impacts on all other aspects of who we are. And identity is much more of interest to me, and so that's what's much more explored. Is this in this case this creation of a what is perceived as a perfect or at least a supremely beneficial social construct, which is not remotely like the one that most of us live in now. So, I mean, this is part of what makes art interesting, is that challenge doesn't have to be offensive or hostile or anything like that. But challenge is very valuable. I think that we all need to explore our presumptions. We inherit all these presumptions, and a lot of people, it seems, go through life not thinking much anything about it. It's like, oh, this is just the way things are. And as somebody who is in the LGBTQ spectrum, a B and a T, part of my life was spent walking into invisible walls in my head that were part of this conditioning that I just inherited, and I had to deconstruct. And I think that a little bit of deconstruction, or at least awareness of how much of how we think is inherited, and we don't even we didn't consciously even choose it. It's just this suitcase of things that was just handed to us. And part of our growth as human beings is to at the very least be conscious of that, and to determine.
Unlock it.
That's right. Unlock it and find what works. If there's that stuff works, go for it. I mean, sure, there's a lot of stuff that works. That's fine. But what doesn't, you need to at least be aware of it. And certainly you need to be aware that this doesn't work for other people. The whole notion that, people can be so insecure because they, a lot of the issues in the world are with people's insecurity and being threatened by people making different choices to them. And because it's threatening, because it says, oh, I'm feeling comfortable because I'm like supposedly everyone else. Meanwhile, here's this person, and they're very different, and that makes me uncomfortable because it suggests maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe there are other ways to be, or it's just, or maybe they're like a mirror that shows you a part of yourself you've repressed, and you're not, you're saying, no, that's not there. And then here's somebody who is quite open about that, and that's threatening. So all of this stuff, I think, is valuable. It is challenging, and it is uncomfortable sometimes. I'm certainly not looking to make people uncomfortable. Well, there's some ways, in some instances, not necessarily with this work, but there's some ways where I'm quite happy to make people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's not a problem. But with this series, I'm hoping that it's more a case of people enjoying stepping into another world and dealing with a very different landscape and realizing there are a great many other visions for how we can be. And take a look at this one.
Well, one thing that I've learned in life is that, becoming intelligent and becoming, well-rounded and becoming, sort of educated, it isn't just about learning, it's about unlearning. You've got to like unravel all of that shit that sort of, like you said, that's sort of just been handed to us in a suitcase and we've been carrying around for all of these years. Just, we've got to unpack it and take the things out that don't work for us and, and keep it moving. It's just a fact that we have to unlearn. There's so many things that people need to unlearn. And I think that when people are uncomfortable, it's because they've stumbled upon something that is making them learn or making them, see a part of it, like you said, a part of themselves, or maybe it's even a part of somebody else that they know, or somebody that, but whatever it is, it's fear and anger. Fear is all those hateful things are all wrapped up in fear. It's all
fear. And I hear these people saying, well, you can't, you're challenging somebody's basic, ideas system, their identity. I've switched my identities, my idea systems, my belief systems numerous times. It can be done. You do not fall apart. It's, I'm the first to admit I'm not physically brave. I hate heights. But I am fearless when it comes at looking at what it like. I've taken on several religions, and I'm now an atheist, and I had big investments in those identities. I grew up in a United Church home, which is a pretty relaxed liberal Protestant denomination in Canada, and went all over the place from there. And thankfully, I had a pretty sort of self-taught. They didn't have post-secondary education, but they were passionate learners. My family, my parents, my family, and I was used to people coming over, and religion and politics were definitely talked around the dinner table, and people were reading big thick books, and we all got book-shaped gifts at Christmas and birthdays. And I explored and followed things and got very involved in things. And then I would discover stuff that didn't work. And what I'm observing is that for many people, they are so invested in that feeling of yumminess and comfort and security that they forego the part of their brain that's saying, wait a minute, this, sure, this part's nice, but this part doesn't make any bloody sense. I couldn't let that go. And the fact that something was nummy and yummy wasn't good enough. So I was a born again Christian. I was a Baha'i. I dabbled in all sorts of things, checking them out, getting to know people, getting involved in community, and eventually all of them, there'd be things that would come up and say, you know what? this is all very nice, but I don't understand this, or I don't like this, or whatever. And I would constantly realize that other people, either they completely didn't see that, they really didn't see it, or they were sufficiently invested because of the benefits they were getting to ignore it. And I couldn't do that. And so I have changed my worldview and my self-identity and my, I've taken on and off several garments, and I'm pretty fearless that way. And I think that a lot, if we could have a lot more of that, a lot of the nonsense that we've got going on in the world wouldn't be there. I think that what's going on are people who cannot make that step. They are invested and they feel like this is who they are, and it's not. I can tell you.
I'm sorry, we've got large segments of the population that are walking around sound asleep.
Yes, I feel like it's unfortunate, but that's true. And I think it's unfortunate. I think it's true. And I think the reason why is that life is scary. It's uncertain. You don't know what's going to happen next, and you want something to hold on to. Quite understandable. The problem is when you shut down part of yourself just to hold on to that blanket, because I appreciate the need for having a handle on things and to feel like that you've got a measure of control or a measure of security. I can appreciate that, but if it's not worthy of you, you shouldn't depend on it, because if it's telling you, yes, you can have all this lovely, comfortable feeling, just shut your mind off. That did not work for me. And I mean that when I say did not work, it wasn't easy. There was a lot of pain and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of self-doubt, but I eventually could not subscribe to that, and I could walk away. I eventually would walk away from things, and what I notice is for a lot of people, that first time never happens because it's scary. So I appreciate that, but at the same time, people, we're in the part of why we are where we are is the people not being able to take that step and grow out of maybe something they grew up with, sure, but there's the world is far bigger than any of our imaginings, and it seems such a shame to be stuck somewhere in a place that makes you small just so that you feel comfortable and secure. There's nothing wrong with those feelings, but try to find something that is worthy of your subscribing to it, and that works for you, and does not ask that you be a fool or a child in order to be part of it. You should be able to be a wide awake adult who's quite able to take in new information, who isn't frightened by new information, who can be challenged. And if you're finding that your comfort is based on cutting yourself off and not listening to new information, I'm afraid I think that's unfortunate.
Well, thinking is hard work. That's why so few people do it.
It is.
Well, as I see we're getting to the end of our time together, is there anything I want to let people know, first of all, that you can go to www.anewawakeseries.com. You can also go to www.mewe.com.
Yes.
Is that the site?
Yeah, that's right. It's pronounced Anu, by the way.
Anu, okay.
Yeah, that's right. Anu to me sounds like a name. Thank you for bringing that up. I would like to say something about that. The Anu Awakes site, the main site, I'm very happy with. I'm having my dearly beloved copy editor go through it, because there's still ridiculous little typos we need to clean up. But that is like an appendices for the entire series. That gives you the big picture of how ANU works and how the attached land system works in quite some detail. So I'm very happy with that, and I would very much encourage you to look at that if you're interested. The thing is, if you do a Google search for ANU Awakes series, you are also going to see a Facebook page. And I need to say quickly something about that. The ANU Awakes series that you will find on Facebook, I set it up. It's a business page. Everything that's on there, at least up to this moment, I set up as of last November. Subsequent to that, my personal page was taken over. I was foolish enough to fall for people who took it away from me. The ANU Awakes series Facebook page was attached to that page. That, it was through that account that I created the business page. I no longer have administrative access to that page. What's on there is fine up to this point, but I'm trying to experiment and see, because eventually the people dropped. My original page is gone. It seems after 8 months they finally said, we're done with this. I never was able to get it back. I was never able to speak to anyone at Facebook, as many people will attest. That's one reason I've got a MeWe. MeWe is an alternate platform, and for a lot of people unhappy with Facebook, so if you were to go to the MeWe, and it's just MEWE, there is an ANU Awake series page there, which I have complete control over. And
you've also got the Instagram and the Twitter account, right?
Yeah. So I've got a number of, yes. You look me up, you'll find that there are links to all of those. I hope eventually to be able to get control of the Facebook page again, but I just want to caution people. If you look at the Facebook version, I have no control over that anymore. I have no administrative control. And in fact, I've tried to post something on it in advantage. So somebody's still there, but that's unfortunately is an issue. But yes, the ANU Awake series, the main site, it's very graphic. It's all this kind of artwork. It's like an encyclopedia of the planet ANU and attached land. I'm very happy with, and you're welcome to look at that. And as I say, that will be good for the entire series, which takes place over a long span of time. Each point is very distant from the one before and after. So it's different characters, different setting. But this is the first one. This is what starts it all. This is the beginnings of the series. Yeah, that. So I want to. So I'm going to hold this up. That's the one I hope you will take a look at. You can find that online.
Was very, very brave in saying book one, because that does give you some sort of a responsibility, doesn't it?
Well, it does. But I mean, the actual fact of the matter is that the first novel I wrote was the 8th novel. And then I said, no, this isn't right. And I ended up going back and writing. But I've written portions of most of the novels. They're not all done. So, I mean, yes, it's true. They're brave. Second novel is finished. I'm having my last reader take a look at it. I'm going to be starting to work on the ebook version. And the thing is, it's very nice that people can all, because this is like an ebook. This is published by Book Baby, who does this for people. But you can also get this. This is a print-on-demand version, and we've got so many things now that are subscription services, and you don't own those. Just like Facebook, you don't own your Facebook page. You can get an ebook, but there's a possibility at some point that for whatever reason you could lose it. You could lose all your ebooks. Some people have, and you get a print-on-demand version. Nobody's touching it. You were asked about one final thing I'd like to say. I would in fact like to take a very brief moment to promote another person's book.
Yes, you mentioned it.
This has to do, when this is being filmed, there was a horrendous event that happened where a famous author named Salman Rushdie was attacked, and at this moment is still alive, and we can hopefully recover, but was attacked, and he was attacked for this book, The Satanic Verses. This came out in 1988, and I was at the University of Waterloo working at the library, and we got word that this book there was a fatwa, which is I don't know what the exact translation is, but a
Like a bounty, doesn't it? Like a bounty of some sort, isn't it?
There was $1 million bounty put on the head, preferably no longer attached, of the author for writing this book, which was deemed blasphemous. And all sorts of people, there were several people who were killed. There were translators. There was a Japanese translator who was murdered. There were other people. It was seen because of the content of the book. It's a very interesting book. It's quite funny book, actually, about South Asian life experience in London. It's got a lot of magical realism in it. It's quite crazy and fantastic.
And it's not about the worship of Satan or evil or anything like that.
I forget now where the term comes from, but it's nothing to do with that.
Right.
What it is the part that people object to is that there are sections of it which are like reflections on various aspects of the life of the prophet, and they are fictional to my knowledge, and the devout people, fundamentalists. I know Muslims who would never ever consider any of these positions. These are extremists. These are fundamentalists. These are the kind of people who say. So anyway, the reason I held this up is I want to encourage people to read this. The antidote to somebody telling you you cannot read it is to read it. What you need to do is look at the lists of anything that's censored, anything that has a fatwa issued against the author, and read it. The best antidote to this kind of intimidation is not to be intimidated. And I think authors need to, especially everyone should, authors certainly need to stand up for other authors, because some authors live in very bad conditions and have tremendous courage, far more than I would have, to say what they need to say. Salman Rushdie grew up in India. He was very familiar with the Muslim tradition, and he felt he had the right to make social commentary, amusing social commentary, and intelligent speculative fiction about that. He's right. He does. We all do. We do not. If people want to make rules for themselves, they of course can do that. That's part of this insecurity piece we were talking about, making lots of rules so people are in this little box where they feel nice and safe. We do not. If we do not subscribe to those rules,
activism never feels safe. Activism and speaking out never feels safe. No. And I think what we're talking about here is freedom of speech, and we have to protect it for everybody, whether you agree with the person or whether you disagree. We have to have freedom of speech.
It's like that thing that they came for this group and they came for that group, and they didn't say anything because I wasn't part of that group. And then guess who's next? Something where we realize that this is a fundamental part of living a real and a full life, is to not let fear dictate how we live. And that's what we are all about. And I can tell you, having lived for the first 20 years of my life trying to fit in and trying to not be who I am, and not being able to look at the person in the mirror because I didn't like that person at all, that it wasn't worth it. Fear is not, living in fear is a terrible, terrible idea. It really is something that, it needs to be addressed and it needs to be rectified, because it's a terrible way to live your life. And it certainly is an unconscionable thing to try to do to other people. And so that we need to, in every way, I mean, of course, it doesn't have to be hostile and confrontational, but we do need to say no, say this is not for me, and I would honestly say it's not great for you either. but it's certainly not something I have any reason to subscribe to. So I'm not going to, and I have that option. And everyone has that option. And for this kind of, for somebody to feel that they are justified to and in all likelihood, this kid who attacked Rushdie has not read the book, won't even, maybe not even have seen the book, and yet is sufficiently fearful and threatened that they feel justified to try to kill him. How insane, how sad is that? And so, you know, this is something that all people who have, especially people who are creating new visions and new ways of looking at things, we have to do it, and we have to, you know, as I say, it doesn't have to be rude or hostile, but we do have to challenge. We do have to make things uncomfortable. That's one of Rushdie's quotes, is that poetry is about waking the world up and challenging and being annoying. And this is very important. You know, all of the great minds of history, what's one thing you can say about Socrates? He was bloody annoying. He pissed everybody off. And he felt that was his job. And, you know, to a certain extent, he's right. Our job is, the vast majority of people are absorbing their conditioning and are living their lives. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. But certainly for anybody who has a problem with it, they need to be able to step away and to examine their life and to make informed choices and not be afraid.
Well, as James Baldwin said, it is the artist's responsibility is to disturb the peace and to, you know, absolutely. I think James Baldwin is brilliant. Madonna's been using his quote quite a bit, but it is James Baldwin who said that, and he was a brilliant writer. That's
I remember reading him well. Yes.
Yeah, another writer to definitely go out, pick up the books, read.
Oh, so many.
We could be here all day, but us, we must end the interview, and we
thank you.
I'm so grateful to have had you on the show, and I'm so grateful that I have my very own copy that no one can take away from me. As Lyn said, order yourself a print on demand copy. Where can they get that print on demand copy?
Certainly Amazon. There's a number, any place that you can get an ebook. Many of those also list the print on demand version. Not everybody. Apple iBooks, I don't think, offers that. It's still, I think, printed by BookBaby, which is the publisher. But yeah, see.
Mine is specially.
It is.
Look at yours.
Wow. You are special. Yeah, so it would be very clear. I think Kobo, I think a lot of them, it says you get the choice, ebook, print book. Obviously, the print book will take a little longer to get to you. There was initially a number of people who were actually complaining to me that they were ordering it and they weren't getting it, but everybody's gotten it now. And it's just a case where physically it's got to be printed. They have to.
We'll put a link down in the description. I'll work with Lyn to get a link down in the description below this video, or below if you happen to be reading this in a transcribed version. The link will be in the text, and we'll make sure that everybody is able to get themselves a book. And you know, it's definitely worth it. It's an amazing book, and I look forward to not only the next book, but I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
And myself as well. This has been delightful. Thank you.
And my pleasure. You guys, everybody have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Love each other. Stay together. We need to be together more than ever at this moment. We need to stick together, and peace.
Peace and love.